So Hannah's regular swimming in a pool made her a handful of friends quickly. And one of those friends referred an employee that came in who was living in isolation. She became known as an employee, and some things happened with her employment, and she had to quit working there. I want to say she got fired, but I'm not sure that is an appropriate word, but her employment relationship was severed. Now, the very famous Harry Met Sally, they're on their way to New York. What if you die one of those New York deaths where nobody notices you're gone until the smell wafts out into the hallway? This was one of those New York deaths in the New York Metro, but here in my neighborhood, New Jersey, near the Lincoln Tunnel. Now, the woman's name was Mary Ann, and I went to her funeral. I was a last-minute addition. I wanted to go. Hannah was invited and had a seat in the car to be driven by the attorney who had made all the arrangements, and two other people who were associated with the pool. So three women, all swimmers, and at the last minute, an employee of the pool canceled, and so I was able to get her seat. So it ended up being the attorney, who was a man, me, and then three women who were all swimmers at the pool. So a woman in the car, her name is Jean, and told a story about how she and the deceased, she and Mary Ann, had once been friends. They lived in the same building, and something happened. And just knowing the profile of the deceased, I did meet her once when she was alive. I feel like 99% of what I know of the deceased was post-mortem. And Mary Ann did not tell the story in any great detail, but it just was clear to me that the deceased, I keep messing up, the deceased is Mary Ann. Jean is the surviving former friend. So Jean tells the story, and to me it was just one of those classic Mary Ann sabotage the friendship. Came up with something petty. The bite the hand that feeds you could be a phrase here, but Jean was, by all accounts, the only person who took a personal touch with Mary Ann. Jean knows that she had severed any of the friendships she had had. Nobody visited. The woman lived in complete isolation until she ended up getting this assignment at the pool. So my point in this is that people who die one of these famous Harry Met Sally New York deaths, nobody notices till the smell drifts out in the hallway. And literally, that's what happened with Mary Ann. No one knew she had died until they began smelling her rotting corpse. So the Harry Met Sally thing was, of course, fictional, but it did represent something that does happen in a very crowded metro area like I'm in. It happens with a frequency that makes it famous enough for a Hollywood movie. So some people, I guess my reason for visiting the deceased, Mary Ann, is because for people to be so isolated, so lonely that nobody knows they died until the smell drifts out in the hallway, for someone to get that way, it takes a long time. And in Mary Ann's case, she had this friendship with Jean, someone who would have checked on her and not let her body be discovered the way it was, but actually in some reasonable, not horrible way. People do die, and they do die at home, and they do die alone. But the fact that nobody even notices that they had died, Jean could have been that woman to notice. And she wasn't, because Mary Ann sabotaged the friendship. And it was probably, Mary Ann had been a career woman in the city, university educated, had some work of some type at her memorial service. I probably knew what it was, but I've forgotten. and she lived here in New Jersey and worked in the city for probably 4 or 5 decades. And so she probably had friends, which one by one, and finally the final one severed with Gene. It takes a long time to get lonely, and it takes a long time to get isolated. And if you're going to die one of those famous Harry Met Sally New York deaths, you got to get started early, and you got to sever those relationships that might be the one to discover you in some reasonable time. Now, Gene pulled away from Marianne with relatively minor trigger. There wasn't that much invested in the friendship, but with a husband and wife, with a couple, the husband may hang on longer. The husband might tolerate things like relentless, decade-long criticism of his family. The husband might tolerate very nasty death threats at his friends. The husband, because the husband has a greater investment in the relationship than Gene had with Marianne. This also works in the feminine side. The woman might tolerate much more and persist in an investment because there's a financial investment and a emotional investment and a legal bind in the couple. In the case of Gene and Marianne, that bind didn't exist, and that relationship severed quickly. There may be some moments in this analysis where it's coincidentally tied to someone else. If it's suggested that that's true, I deny it. So Hannah's swimming